Good morning, everyone. My name is Hubert Topinka from Center of Knowledge and Technology Transfer of Charles University, and I'll be your host today. I would like to welcome all of you watching us today online and you present here in Campus Ibernská in Prague. Today we'll be talking about the role of universities fulfilling sustainable development goals. We'll have several very interesting speakers from major European universities. You'll hear several interesting online presentations, and you'll have a space to ask questions directly through Slido. And now let us proceed, and I would like to welcome our first guest speaker, Dr. Marie Vymazalová, member of Rector's Board for Social Affairs and Sustainable Development from Charles University. Welcome.
Thank you. I welcome you, every of you, on behalf of Charles University. I'm delighted to welcome you on this online event about strategies of sustainable development in the milieu of universities. The theme of today's event is highly actual. Many of us have a big challenge ahead of us, how to integrate sustainability into the everyday function of universities. Many of you are already a few or many steps further and are solving how to keep the set path truly sustainable. I really appreciated that you have joined our invitation event to share good practice for the sake of sustainability development. I wish you all an inspiring meeting and hope that this discussion that will lead us to think about where our activity in sustainable development at universities is needed and how to communicate it. It's targeted to the academic community. In conclusion, I would like really thank you to entire team that prepared this event. Have a nice day or morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vymazalová. And let us proceed further. And our next guest speaker will be Nikola Rusová and Dana Kapitulčinová. Nikola Rusová is a sustainability manager from Charles University. Nikola, if you can hear us, please, you can proceed.
I would like to thanks to everyone joining us. I'm going to tell you some short informations about Charles University that you can have some wider context. Charles University was founded in 1347 in Prague. So it's one of the oldest continuously operating university in Europe, and it is the oldest and largest university in Czech Republic. It started with 4 original faculties. Nowadays, Charles University consists of 17 faculties. Most of them are located in Prague, but we also got 2 faculties in Hradec Králové and in Plzeň. We also got a lot of academic institutes, other units and centers, and also like 4 or 5 subsidiaries. For example, Charles Games. I would like to recommend it to you a new game called Decarbonize. It's a climate survivor strategy card game, and it's also in English, and it's free, so everybody can play it. Charles University nowadays offers around 900 study programs, of which over 200 are in a foreign language. In total, we got more than 50,000 students that are studying in all of these programs. What about employers? We've got over 8,500 employees, including academic, scientific, administrative, and other stuff. What is also important to say that the university owns or manages hundreds of properties. For example, we also got a botanical garden. And as I already indicated, Charles University does not have one common campus. And it's also important to know that a lot of the subjects are in monument zone. So the situation with the energy management is not so easy as it could look like. For example, the university center called Carolinum is located in the old town of Prague, and it's a very old historic building. As you can see, university also participate in 2 world ranking focused on social and environmental sustainability in higher education institute. Next. I would like to talk about Charles University and sustainable development. First of all, I would like to point out that I have been only working at the university since October of last year. So it's quite funny that I'm talking about some history. From 2019, rapid development towards a sustainable university can be documented. It doesn't mean that nothing happened in the field of sustainable development until that year, but since then the subject has been grasped more concretely, more systematically. In 2019, the first debates and discussion began. Also, the first roundtable on sustainable development took place. Later, the university programmatically joined the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In 2021, sustainable development was officially incorporated into the strategic plan, like the strategic plan of the whole university. It was like few sentences, but also small steps are very important. And since the beginning of 2022, when the new management of university took over, there have been quite big changes. Since January, Professor Milena Kraličková is the first woman rector of the Charles University. Also, several new positions are created at the university, like you have already heard about member of the Rector's Board for Social Efforts and Sustainable Development, Dr. Vymazalová. Also my position, Sustainable Development Manager. And I also have a colleague in my office for equal opportunities. And since the beginning of this year, we also got an ombudsman, quite important role for university. And the university also started working on a strategic material aimed to sustainable development. Maybe it's important to mention that initially the drivers of the changes were primarily students. Later, the university management also became actively involved. So what else to say about the strategic materials? The first strategic material is called Sustainable Development Strategy of Charles University on the way to Sustainability 2030. This document is rather theoretical, I can say, and it's quite brief. Maybe it's good to say that it was also like our goal. It has around, I think, 8-9 pages. And it defines 4 key areas and their objectives, like management or organization, administration and operation means like the university is running, education, science and research, and the last one is also important, the third role, and external cooperation. We would like to update the strategy regularly, like when we got more experience for the first time in 2026. And then we also got the action plans, like specific projects included in the action plans will serve to successfully implement the strategy. Action plans will be cover a 2-year time period. The first action plan for 2023 and 2024 focuses primarily on cooperation, communication, and education within the university. And we would like to create like a solid foundation for successful implementation, especially improve university dialogue and coordination. This is very important. Like we have so many faculties and we already know that all the information not goes through, and yeah. Both documents are currently published for members of academic community and can also be commented on by them. And we hope that they will be accepted by the university in the middle of this year when everything goes right. So now I would like to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Kapitulčinová, who is also a part of the team that is working on the strategy, and she's a specialization for sustainable food and catering and all these stuff.
Okay, hello everyone, good morning. Hello Nikola, I hope you can hear me, and thank you very much for the presentation and for giving me the opportunity to speak and follow up on what you just said. So as Nikola mentioned, I am focusing on food and sustainability and SDGs, but I work at Charles University Environment Center primarily as a researcher, but currently also as a coordinator of sustainability and also as a coordinator for one project called UNILEAD, which I will speak about a little bit more in a few moments. But first of all, why, as part of the strategy and the action plans, we actually focus on sustainable food at universities? It's because diet actually relates to numerous environmental and socio-economic aspects of sustainable development. Pretty much to all SDGs that you can remember, food would play some kind of role. So we actually see that food is very important, and universities should provide healthy and sustainable food to students, to employees, and to visitors, and also to lead by example in society. That's why we'd like to aim to continue collaboration with also other universities, which I will mention soon in the project UNILEAD, but also to engage students and employees to really reach the goals we set in the strategy and in all aspects of university life, not only in food, of course, but in everything that actually the university is doing. I mentioned the project UNILEAD. This is actually quite a big consortium of 25 public universities in the Czech Republic. It has been running since 2022, so since last year, and it's funded by the Ministry for Education, Youth and Sports. And it's the aim is to focus on three aspects of university working or higher education institutions working. It's operations, which we focused on in 2022. Then the second one is engagement of students and of employers. That's this year. And then hopefully next year we would focus on education, how to implement sustainable curriculum in the working of the university. The project is coordinated by Masaryk University of Brno, and Charles University is one of the partners. And the whole idea of this project of university leaders in SDGs is to come up with a voluntary sustainability standard for Czech higher education institutions, by which we could measure and follow up on progress when it comes to sustainable development and SDGs, how we could contribute to that. In this project, we're actually focusing on 5 different areas when it comes to operations. We're focusing on waste, on water and biodiversity, on food, energy, buildings and IT, and mobility. That's more the operational areas and aspects. And then we have 3 topics which we call horizontal, because they actually relate to all of these 5 that I just mentioned. And this is responsible procurement, so what the university is buying and how, and what are the standards for purchasing. Then we have strategy and partnerships, because that comes across all of these as well. And the last one, but not least, of course, is marketing and communication, because we feel and we see that it's very important to be able to communicate the topic and be able to engage students and employees in a meaningful way. So I wanted to say that each university that's actually involved in the project is leading on one of these topics, and Charles University is leading on the area of food. That's why I'm also talking about this, and I will show you a few things that we are doing as part of this project. So what we did last year is that we actually mapped the situation at Czech higher education institutions when it comes to sustainable food. And we compare this to what is actually happening abroad in universities, mostly in Europe, based on desktop review. And we will hopefully publish a research article on this in the next months or so. And based on this, we actually prepared a set of recommendation goals and measures for Czech higher educations, which are available online. We have a summary document and quite an extensive table document, and it's an Excel, which is more aimed at like catering services, the practical people, while the first one is more aimed at university management to actually understand what could be done in this area. And this actually happened in all of the 5 areas that I mentioned before, and the 3 horizontal ones as well for all the other topics. And I'd like to also mention some good practice examples that followed up directly on this UniLead project. The catering services, the canteens, have started to be very active, following up on a workshop that we actually held online in October last year. And they partnered up with Prof, Czech Republic, and they started to provide training for chefs of our canteens for vegan cooking. And the aim is to train sooner or later, or gradually train all the chefs for vegetarian and vegan cooking, because that's something that's quite lacking when it comes to education of chefs in general in the Czech Republic, so that they can actually provide healthy and nutritious foods, nutritious meals. And the aim for the university, for the catering, for the dining services, is to actually introduce 1 vegetarian and 1 vegan meal on a daily menu of every Charles University canteen by the end of 2024. We actually have 7 canteens, so that's why we are giving the end of 2024 to make sure that we actually are able to meet this goal, this aim. And we would also try to make markings so that the students and employees see in the menu and see when they are ordering foods whether this is a vegan option, vegetarian option, or some other option. We also, or the catering services are also considering putting in gluten-free symbols and things like this, which is currently not on offer in the canteens. And second example that I'd like to share with you is the idea of using returnable meal boxes. So the idea is to reduce the amount of single-use packaging for takeaway meals from canteens, and also for single-use cups for coffee. So actually in January this year, in one of the canteens, they tried, Canteen Troja, they tried a pilot for using this system. It's called Rekrabička and Rekelímek, so it's basically a company that's offering these returnable boxes and coffee cups. And basically what happens is that the student or the employee pays a deposit, they use the box, and then they can return it not only in this one canteen but in any of the dining services where these boxes are being on offer. And actually in Prague there's quite many, it's many restaurants that are involved. So this is quite handy that you can actually give it back anywhere you like. And in the time from January to March this year, it's been used about 100 times in this one canteen. So we have saved about 100 single-use packaging, which I think is quite nice, and they would like to expand this for all of the 7 canteens. So we are quite curious, and hopefully we'll see an increase in this amount, and we'd like to start to measure somehow also how we are actually reducing the amount of waste being generated by using this example. So with this example, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Again, thank you for my colleague Nikola for giving the introduction to Hubert, Topinka, for actually organizing this whole event and giving us the opportunity to share some of these ideas and new things with us. And I hope you will enjoy the day with us today. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any questions. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot to all my colleagues from Charles University. Yes, we have space for, I believe, 2 or 3 questions. I can see there are a few questions already in Slido, and maybe it would be interesting to see how what were the key challenges introducing the sustainability agenda in Charles University, and try to be as practical as possible. And maybe I'll also ask one more question. What's the involvement of the students in the process?
Well, the biggest challenge to me is to coordinate the whole thing. We are a huge institution, and for example, we in the Charles University Environment Center have been working in the field of sustainable development for the past 30 years, but this has not quite been reflected in the daily operations of the university as a whole. And as Nikola was saying, we are 17 faculties, I think we are like 4 or 5 research centers and so on. So I think the biggest challenge to me is to really get the idea of what sustainable development means to every single student and employee, and to kind of get the common understanding what this is, and that it's not some kind of add-on that's too expensive to do, but it's basically how we want to live our lives in a sustainable way here together. So to me, this is probably the biggest challenge, how to communicate the idea to everyone and get everyone involved, which is actually what the SDGs are also trying to do. Not leave no one behind, I think, is the motto of SDGs. Nikola, do you have any additions to that?
No, I would like to say that you got it true, and meaning involve everybody means also the students. So how I already said, maybe at the first time, at the beginning, the students were the pushers of everything, but nowadays we're trying to involve them into it and also get some ideas from them. I sent the strategy to all the students, initiatives and groups and all of these, and asked them on their opinion. They also got a chance to send their comments. And next Thursday, we are going to have a round table on this topic, and they are also invited. So I think that we are really trying to, do it like across the whole university, not just talking with the management and higher positions.
Great, thank you very much for the addition. And I think that partly also answers the second question on student involvement. As Nikola was saying, she was not here at that time, but we remember in 2019 when really students wanted and required some action on especially climate change when it comes to the university. And I think this was the spark that actually made the management of the university think that this is an actual issue and we should really be doing something. But I think, as Nikola already mentioned, it was with the new management, with the change of the top management, that things have really been put together in a more strategic way. And we actually have also a former sustainability manager here, so we had with us. So I think it's really good that we have this position of someone actually pushing this idea and everything forward in terms of being employed, because before then it was just people who somehow liked the idea and who somehow pushed for it, but we didn't have anyone top in the management who we could actually speak to. So I think this is really important for the students and for the employees to have someone in the university leadership who they can talk about the ideas and what could be done, because I think that it's really powerful. And I think we have many, we have like 50,000 students. So if even just a drop of them was interested and did something, I think that could create a really big change. So by this, I think we're even inviting anyone who is interested in this topic, just get in touch. There is information, contact details in our presentation. I think it will be shared somewhere publicly, so, or just Google us. You can find us and get in touch and see what we can do together.
Thank you. I believe while we're waiting for our next speaker, I can see a hand from Christoph. I don't know if you have a question or...
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals and implementing them into your organization. My question is, did you or do you involve somehow the researchers, the academics, in your strategy? And if yes, how?
Very good question. Thank you. And I think that's a question to me probably, because my role actually is in the preparation of the strategy is exactly what you're heading to. So I work in the Environment Center of Charles University, and my role was mostly to make sure that we actually reflect the latest research findings in the preparation of the strategy. So even before it kind of went to public remarks, we actually had a few consultations with the researchers in our center to say what their opinion is on the current strategy and the action plan. And now we have like a draft at the moment, and now we have like a 2-month period when anyone from the university can bring in their opinions on the strategy. So any employee, any student can come, and we actually have an online form where they can add in anything they wish. And we also added like a text box where we say, I'm adding this based on these research findings, or based on this text or that document. So we're also trying to make that open as possible, and this information went to the newsletter that each staff in the university is involved in. So yes, we're trying to, and we'll see what comments we will actually get from the research community, because it's now open. So we will see, I think in mid-April. What came together, and then we'll have another round of implementing the comments based on what came in. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for this long distance run. You will
yes,
thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is one other challenge I was thinking about when Hubert was asking about challenges, is because I'm a researcher, so I see the research perspective. But Nikola is more, and her colleagues are more the people who actually need to let it go through the process of implementation at the university, which is not an easy task, as you can imagine. No. And it takes a long time. To my surprisal, it really takes a long time to go through all the structures to make it right. So we kind of have like a time frame which we have to meet. No matter how long discussions we researchers would like to have, we simply have to stop at one point and say, this is it, and we need to move forward. So yeah, so that's another one. But I think we're so far so good, so I think we're heading in the right direction. Thank you very much for your question again.
And it's probably good to know that it's for the first time in history that all the members of academic community can tell their opinion and share with us.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting from my colleagues, and I can see that our next speaker is already online. I would like to welcome Dr. Govers, Professor Govers. Thank you very much. Professor Govers is a Vice Rector and Head of Sustainability Office from University of Leuven. I think if you're ready, we can start and with your presentation, and there should be time also for a few questions at the end. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for having me and for allowing me to present the vision of KU Leuven on sustainability. In your meeting, my apologies that I cannot stay longer, but well, I have other duties and I have to be careful with my time. Belinda Wijkmans, who is a collaborator of us, prepared a slide deck of a presentation. It's quite a few slides. I think we have 30 minutes in total. So I will rush from time to time, but if you have questions, I will make sure that we have 10 minutes in the very end, or 15 minutes to have an exchange of ideas and ask questions, because I think that's the most useful part of such a meeting and such an interaction. So what I'll present is our vision on the role of universities in fulfilling SDGs. I'll talk a bit about the strategic framework, but it's mostly about how we deal with sustainability at KU Leuven. Very specific and very concrete, because I think that's the most interesting and the most important for you. And you have been thinking about the SDGs as a framework for so many times now. It's not worth to spend a lot of time there. Just very briefly introducing KU Leuven. Our slogan is inspiring the outstanding. We are a big university. That's something we can say honestly. It has about 60,000 students. About 1/5 of them come from abroad. Now, of course, if you look at PhD students, which are 7,000 or 8,000, then half of them come from abroad. So it's a truly international university. It is it's a comprehensive university, so you can study almost anything you like at KU Leuven. And in the masters, many programs, not all, but 90% perhaps of the programs is offered in English. We are not only in Leuven, we are also at different campuses within Flanders, but that's more of an internal importance than it is important for you. Of course, it's a research-driven university. We are highly ranked in rankings like Times Higher Education and so forth, and we think that that is important for us. We believe that research will contribute to solving the problems humanity has, and that universities have to play a key role there. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals you all know, and what we use them indeed as a framework. What preceded there is a history to that. We had a first policy framework starting in 2014, so there is now about 10 years of work on sustainability at KU Leuven. The main pillars that we distinguish in this work have not changed. So it's always research, education, the operations of the university, and then let's say society, international solidarity. You could replace that with interaction and communication and collaboration, but let's say outreach in general is also quite important. We started it 10 years ago, and of course in the beginning it was a little bit of a chaos, as these things go. But we now have set up, incorporated in the new strategic plan that we developed in 2017. Sustainability is incorporated in that strategic plan, as you can see. So there is the plan was entitled At a Crossroads for a Sustainable Society. There is a sustainable policy plan, and we try to work more in a systematic, structured way around sustainability. We are sometimes successful, and sometimes we are not. That's the reality also. But we try to work on these different fields: education, research, business operation, and society, through policy and governments and through specific programs. In order to get this done, I'm the vice rector, and what is important is we also have a sustainability council, which is partly composed of experts in different domains around we want to work, but also partly composed of representatives, people who are representative for the group of science and technology, for instance, or the group of biomedical sciences, and who is, let's say, the place where we discuss policies and where we try to formulate advice for the central governing body of the university, which is it's called the Gemeenschappelijk Bureau, so it's basically the executive committee. I'm a member of that, and that's the place where we take the most important decisions for that for the university. In terms of what do we do? Well, we spend quite a bit of time and energy on the operations of the university, and you could argue, well, why do you do that? Because if you look at the total emissions of KU Leuven, and you compare that with, let's say, what the chemical industry in Antwerp is emitting, then it's peanuts, right? We are in the tens of thousands of tons. They are in the millions of tons. So it's 2 orders of magnitude difference. And you could really wonder why we should worry about that so much. But we think it's really very important because of several reasons. But the key word there is credibility. If we want to educate students and we want to, convince them that sustainability is important and that not everything should revolve around economic growth, then we need to behave accordingly. Otherwise, we lose all credibility with our students. We would also lose credibility if we do not do this in scientific research, because, of course, if our researchers conclude, look, we have to consider sustainability as an important field, but, well, we don't care because we continue to work as we did before, that's also not going to work. And lastly, we think it is interesting to work on that, also because it is, for us, clear that sustainability is high on the agenda for many years to come, and it will also help to attract students and people, for sure. So one of the things we started with was to set up a travel policy. So what we do now is we avoid traveling by plane if it is possible for short trips, and if it's a longer trip, then our our professors pay an offset contribution. It's now 40 euros per ton. It may increase a little bit in the future. We will see how things go. The important thing there is that they pay it themselves, not from their own pocket. They pay it from the money they have at the university, but they get an invoice and they pay for it. And we think that that is very important because, by doing so, they get really involved. They have to think about it, they have to reflect about it, and they have to contribute. We also work very hard to get a more sustainable building park, and you can see here that it is really possible to make significant progress in 2 decades. If you look, the numbers are relative, of course, but you see there the evolution of our CO2 emissions as planned until 2027 and the evolution of our floor space, and you see that, well, one is declining quite significantly, and we will have halved our CO2 emissions by 2027. Per square meter, it's even better. And while our floor space has increased quite systematically. So that's a big gain we make there, and these are the kind of numbers we bring out to our community because we think it's important. One of the things we do internally is that we also account for carbon emissions when we calculate the financial cost of an operation. So although this is, you could say this is, not relevant because it's all internally done, it shifts the burden a bit. So if you emit a ton of carbon at KU Leuven, you pay 60 euros virtually. But okay, it does help. It sets the spirit. We have been working for ICT for a long time on sustainability because, well, it is important and it's a sector where we have a high throughput like you have. Every 4 years, you need another computer. There's really nothing you can do. But our computers are recycled and they are disposed of, let's say, responsibly after that. We make sure that this has happened. And this was also, the people working on that, Sophie Pirard and her team, they also got a Fair ICT award for that. So that this is recognized. And this is also one of the reasons why we think it's important to stress these things. We do have a green office for our students where we work with them on sustainability issues. This is important, but also not easy. Because students, it's a very, how to say, fluid community. It's not always easy to get some structure and to get some vision in there. But okay, we make progress. We organize a sustainability week every year. This is popular, and they collaborate with different other initiatives. We also work with our staff. We have eco teams that allow us to, develop all kinds of small initiatives. Yes, around sustainability, but it helps really to make sustainability a team at KU Leuven. So it really is quite important. With respect to education, we now offer 2 courses at the bachelor level. One is called Global Challenges for a Sustainable Society, and the idea is there to bring the necessary knowledge to students. We often believe, because we are, it's our day-to-day business, that sustainability is something that students understand and they have a good knowledge about it. And the simple answer, or the simple observation, is that that is absolutely not true, and that we need to make sure that the students who are interested can have this general knowledge, can acquire this general knowledge while being at the university. And that's exactly what we do in this course. And then we hope that here, this is an inquiry that was done with high school students, and well, only 1 out of 7, well, as you can see, there are 6 questions, and only 1 out of 7 was able to give the right answer, the correct answer, as to with respect to the effect of CO2 in the atmosphere. Yeah, well, if you have 6 questions and only 1 out of 7 of your students get it right, that means nobody knows anything about it. That's basically what you would expect by chance. There is also a course that's called a socio-ecological approach to sustainability. There, the major objective is to help students in developing a deeper understanding and their interrelationships. So that goes a little bit deeper. We also work on MOOCs. These are, some of them are now on the edX platform. Some are still under development. We also try to work with our staff to give them information, to train them, to make them aware of what is necessary, etc., etc. Not easy. Not easy, because people are, have a busy agenda, are busy, and it's certainly not easy to reach out to them and to tell them, look, we would like to work with you for some time to do that. With respect to research, I'll be very brief. We believe that academic freedom in research is very important, so we are not financially rewarding people that do research with respect to sustainability. We try to stimulate research on sustainability issues by stimulating the debate around sustainability, by highlighting important research, by bringing people together in reflection groups, especially within Metaforum, which is our interdisciplinary think tank. But we do not financially reward them, because we feel that scientific academic freedom is really very important at a university. And if you start to infringe on that, you have to be very, very careful. So we're not doing that for them. With respect to social engagement, I can honestly say, well, we had a very successful meeting yesterday in the region, that we try to collaborate with the different actors in the region, that we try to collaborate with the different actors in the Flanders region, and also internationally through different objectives, through international networks, through national networks. So we try to be present there and move things forward. Is it always successful? No. Is it successful from time to time? Yes. We try, for instance, to develop a Bachelor of Sustainability within the Una Europa network, so that's going quite well. Within Lero, we try to develop vision papers, and we try to, convince the rectors that they need to spend more energy and time on sustainability issues. Does that work always? No, it doesn't. But okay, it's a slow and gradual process, and we have to keep on pushing, we believe. Do we use the SDGs as a framework? Well, we are not starting every meeting with a slide of the SDGs. That's not what we do. But we very often refer to them, and they have an enormous potential of, making people aware and making people, let's say, open towards, let's say, sustainability issues. Because if they read these Sustainable Development Goals, they will have a hard time to disagree with them. Of course, as you all know. What is also true is the story I'm telling you is a bit lopsided, because I didn't tell you a lot about, access to education, high quality education, right to food, and everything else that is on the SDG agenda. It's not that KU Leuven is not working on that. Absolutely, certainly the educational aspects are very, very important for us. And we work very hard to make sure that KU Leuven remains accessible for students from all groups, so that there is no discrimination whatsoever. We also work quite well. We do lots of research on fairness and and justice in transitions, and we try to apply these principles within the university. Within the course of global challenges, all these aspects are covered, but with respect to the internal organization, and I focused here on, let's say, the ecological sustainability, because, well, I can't tell you everything in 20 minutes. Basically, a very short overview of what we try to do at KU Leuven. I hope this was interesting for you, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them and try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Professor Govers. I believe we have about 10-15 minutes for questions. So first I would like to ask my colleagues or other speakers if they would like to add something or ask before I proceed to Slido.
Good morning. I would have like many questions too, but what really stand out for me in your presentation is the travel policy, because that's something we've been discussing quite a lot during the preparation of our strategy and the action plan and so on. And so you, if I understand it right, it is mandatory to not to take plane for trips less than 3 hours. So you can take any other option, but you have to travel. You can't travel by train, basically. And then you have to pay if you travel by plane for any distance. Is that right?
Yeah.
So for how long have you had this in operation, and what was the reaction of your colleagues? Because this is something we're thinking about, how to approach this, and it of course is a lot of emotions and opinions. So what is your experience?
Thank you very much for the question. It allows me to go a little bit more in detail on this topic. So when I became vice rector, everybody said, Gerard, what the first thing we need is a travel policy, because we can't continue flying like we do without having any responsibility, any interaction, any consideration for the environment and so on. So when we started, we said, I said, okay, that's fine. But we should be aware of the fact that this is an emotional subject, and that we need to address it with the necessary care. Because people who are really very concerned and who are really working hard on sustainability issues, they have very clear views often of what needs to be done. And they think, okay, if we just say that this needs to be done and that's it. But that's not how societies work. That's not how universities work. So we started, first of all, we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make it voluntary. So in the first 1.5 years or 2 years, it was voluntary. So we set up the program, made a lot of noise of it, wrote an email to everybody at the university and asked if they would be willing to voluntarily contribute to this program. The response was not bad. I don't remember the exact numbers, but you never reach 50% with a voluntary program. So we also said at that moment, what we will do is, this was also an important one, and there I really insisted upon, I said, well, what we're not going to do is we're not going to, at the top of the university reserve a certain amount of money to pay for our carbon offsets and then say, okay, that's it. If we do something, then I want every professor to be involved. That's the only way that you change something within your university. So that's basically what we did. So the system has always been, you book your travel, we know that this travel has been booked in your name, and you get an invoice from our side to pay for your carbon offsets. Then after, while this system was voluntary, we visited, Karel van Akker and myself, we visited all faculty councils. We explained why we were doing this, and we also asked a couple of questions to the people. First of all, did they support it? Second, would they support it to make this, would they be willing to enter the scheme themselves? And third, would they think that we should make this mandatory at the university? If we would do so, would they agree? And we got generally a very positive response. So that was really good. And then we said, okay, now we can move to a mandatory system. And that's what we did. But what we also did is we said, okay, if you as a professor think that you should not pay, you can opt out. But if you opt out, you have to give us a justification. Now, until now, it's only a couple of less than 20 professors who have been opting out of the system, and we are now really thinking about phasing out this opting out option, because we think, yeah, okay, in the very end, why should you not pay? Huh? Does this work? Yes, I think it works. The price we set at 40 euros per ton in 2017, that was a pretty realistic price. It was even a lot higher than the ECTS price at that moment, European Carbon Transfer System price. Of course, now it is below, and some people, of course, tell me, Gerard, we should adjust this price, also because we are not taking into account contrails, etc., etc. There I said, yes, okay, we can start up that discussion, but we will have to be careful. We have a difficult financial situation at the university at the moment due to budget constraints that are related to the post-COVID times and the Ukraine crisis. And I think you all are aware of similar problems. It's nothing new. So you cannot now go to the rector already has to tell the professors, look, there will be less money available for you in the coming years. It's very hard, or it's next to impossible to say at the same moment, look, the carbon offset price will rise to 180 euros per ton, which is what some people say it should cost. That's not possible. That will not be, it will never be approved. So, okay, we are now in the process of discussing this. And what I said is, what I think is the best solution is to make some kind of a plan to arrive at a realistic pricing of carbon offsets, let's say within 10 years or so, within 5 years, because otherwise it will not be approved. So what people say is, okay, we should already take into account contrails and the warming caused by contrails. Okay, that can be added, and I think we can do that right away, because that's logical, right? You cause heating of the atmosphere and you pay for it. But then in the next phase, you will have to think about how much people are going to pay. And yeah, we also need to take into account the fact that Europe has set up an ETS system now for flights. But for the moment, most of these warrants, carbon warrants, are given for free. So we don't think it needs to have an immediate impact, but in the long run, we need to take that into account. And we should not tax our people twice. If Europe arrives at taxing flying within Europe realistically, then we should not tax it again at the university. That's also a point that is important for us.
Great.
I hope that this has helped.
Yes, thank you very much. I think there are more questions, but just one really quick follow-up on this. What happens with the money that you actually collect from the professors? Because everyone will ask about that, right?
Everybody asks about that, and I should have told you. So all this money goes into a climate fund, and there the deal is very simple. We had 4 alternatives that we first said, okay, it could possibly be funded. That would be research on climate and carbon. It would be, what is most important is initiatives that reduce or that offset carbon emissions, such as reforestation in the south, or we could invest in infrastructure at KU Leuven that reduces the need to travel, so video equipment and so on, etc. And we asked the people to vote on that, and the overwhelming majority said reforestation in the global south is something that we consider to be the most valuable use of this money. So we are now supporting 2 initiatives that do that. We are also supporting groups. We don't buy the equipment for the groups, but we give them a subsidy when they need to buy, let's say, expensive equipment for video conferencing, etc. With respect to research, we funded 1 project until now. Also, there we are very careful. We are not going to fund fundamental research on climate systems, and that's not the idea. But we had one question where procurement people of our university said, look, we would like to have the T-shirts of KU Leuven to be made out of recycled fibers. But in order to make that possible, the company that we work with needs to set up a small research project to, to check out some things. So that's also one that we funded. And I think that that these are the three different topics that we funded. We are very open about where the money goes. So we are very transparent about that. We communicate about that, and we make sure that everybody understands where this money is used for. And until now, I didn't receive complaints about that. So that seems to work.
Thank you very much. We have two questions on Slido, which you already partly answered, but we have about few minutes left. So if you would like to elaborate or just to confirm, what first question is, who decides which offsets will be used? Is there some methodology?
Yeah, who decides? Well, as I said, we had this. When we went to the faculty council, we proposed 4 alternatives, and the people could vote for that. And we use these voting results now to steer our policies. But in order to make the final decisions, we set up a small committee, which is called the Climate Fund Committee. They make the decisions, and they report to the Sustainability Council and to the Executive Council of KU Leuven.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Second question is, was there at the beginning of implementation some incentive system for push people to use trains? So it's more about the motivation, the incentive system.
I understand your question, Joseph. At least I think I understand it. Well, we are now reflecting on that, whether or not we should use part of these climate funds to, to give a small subsidy to those people that would travel by train on longer train trips. We are thinking on that, but if we want to set it up, I want it to be set up in a way that is fair. That's the first thing, and the second thing is it needs to be efficient. Because that's something I very often get as a question. Yeah, but people could just simply email and then we could give them 100 euros. And I said, no, this is not what we are going to do. If we set up something like that, it has to be automated, and we need to make sure that that people can just tick a box when they order the train ticket, that will automatically lead to a check whether or not the train ticket is eligible, and that the money is directly deduced from the train ticket. Because if we need to invest the time of people to get this going, then this is not sustainable. In many ways, that's too expensive, too cumbersome. We need to develop a system that is, let's say, efficient. So it's something we discuss. What we also discuss, where we have no solution for the moment, is what to do with students who travel. Students are, of course, they are not staff members. We don't have control on how they travel, and I don't want to have control on how they travel. That also be sure. But of course, we would like to work with them, and if we could stimulate them by using some of this money to stimulate them to take the train, then I would certainly be, open to discussion.
Thank you very much, Professor Govers. I believe we could talk for next hours and hours. We have already next speaker waiting, and I'm sure there'll be, or I hope there'll be space also to share experience in the future between Charles University and your site. So thank you very much for presenting and sharing your experience. Thank you very much again, and I would like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Christoph Köller. And when you're ready, Christoph, please you can start, and I believe we'll have a different view on all this topic, and we are very interested to hear from you.
Well, Hubert, when you invited me for this talk, I had no idea what to expect. First of all, maybe I have to introduce myself. My name is Christoph Köller. I'm managing director of a small consultancy company based close to Cologne in Germany, and I'm working in this impact, sustainable development goals, knowledge transfer, innovation business with universities and higher education institutions since a while, since 1998, which is quite a while. So after your invitation, I had no idea what to expect. And I was thinking about, well, what can you tell the people here? And I thought, well, the best thing is to talk about what I'm doing in my professional life, which is impact management, to develop impact management systems for research institutions. And from this point, from this angle, from this point of view, I will come to the Sustainable Development Goals in a case that we are using them as a strategic tool. Well, let's start with the SDGs. You all know them, but my personal experience in my professional life is that they are quite well known, not at every single academics or scientist, but a lot of them know them. But they are not always liked. They are liked now and then because, as you know, working together with academics means they do always have questions with regard to the why and how, and a lot of questions remain open when you're going through the 17 SDGs, including their goals and sub-goals and indicators. And this ends up in a situation that they are sometimes used, the Sustainable Development Goals, and sometimes not. And as I tried to point out at the beginning, I'm focusing on the role of higher education institutions and research institutions as research institutions. So I'm talking about the academics and the researchers mostly. And the world of these researchers consists of ongoing requests for transfer and commercialization of research. That's the angle that knowledge transfer officers and many academics have. They are asked for so-called KPIs, which are quite frequently misleading. For instance, the number of patents, the amount of licensing income, the number of startups, everything that describes something that politicians like to call knowledge technology transfer success. Additionally, we do have a lot of movements going on right now, like the Green Deal, like artificial intelligence, and this causes additional requests to universities and public research institutions to direct their research to a certain extent into these directions. And what happens also is, especially in times of scare public money, is that there is a request to demonstrate the impact of science as a kind of justification. And this is the point. This is the point where the Sustainable Development Goals sometimes come into the game. Sometimes, not always. They come into the game, for instance, in so-called research and impact reports, like, for instance, here from the universities of Leicester and University of Manchester in the UK, in which they are describing all the effects that their teaching and research and administrative efforts do have with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. But as you can see on the right-hand side, these activities mostly happen after the research has been done. Activity which already exists is retrofitted to the SDGs, and a publication or public engagement event is considered, working towards the UN SDGs without capturing whether the activities actually have any influence on the indicators. This is the reality as a colleague of mine, Mark Mann, is seeing it in the UK, and we should have in mind that the UK is quite advanced when it comes to impact, because they do have the research of excellence framework which urges universities to demonstrate the impact of their research. But in most cases, it's about research first and think about impact second. Well, I'm working together with the Museum of Natural Sciences in Berlin, Museum für Naturkunde, which is one of the 8 Leibniz Association's research museums, which means it is a museum on one hand, and on the other hand, they are doing research in biodiversity and ecology, which means they are very strong in this area, belonging to the world-leading research institutes in biodiversity. They have recently received more than 700 million euros from the federal and from the state government in order to improve their buildings, but also to improve research. And of course, politicians, because the museum is based in Berlin, which is the capital of Germany, politicians are sitting constantly in the office of the Director General, Professor Johannes Vogel, Director General of the museum, and asking him, well, we are investing a lot of money, what comes out of it for society, for the economy? How many startups do you spin off? How many patents do you file, and so on? And these so-called indicators, success indicators, as I mentioned earlier, are completely misleading because they do not mirror the potential of this museum. Therefore, Johannes and I came up with the idea, well, we do not want to be led, we want to lead, which means that we tried to change the perspective from reporting impact to managing impact. So what do I mean by this? Well, we started with thinking about what is the Museum für Naturkunde, the Museum of Natural Sciences, about? What are we really good in? And this is about deepening research and communicating results, and we want to change society. Johannes Vogel simply claims, I want to save the world based on my museum, based on my research institution. Some people may call it, well, it sounds a bit weird, but on the other hand, it gives a direction of what this museum and his director wants to do. And this ends up in a future plan, in a Zukunftsplan, in which is described the way the museum would like to contribute to the solution of the so-called grand challenges. And this is a point exactly where the SDG comes into the game, because we are talking about impact, and the understanding of impact is always different. You will almost never ever find a single understanding what people understand and mean when they are saying we want to achieve impact. The Sustainable Development Goals provide a framework for impact because they allow you to come up with at least with some impact areas and some impact goals you may be able to describe you would like to contribute to based on your research. And that was our starting point in Berlin, to take the SDGs as a framework for impact, which is a bit different compared to what I have been listening so far in the previous presentations, because you have been working quite concrete with regard to, I would say, mostly administrative aspects of universities, which is fine too. But in our case, we wanted to include explicitly the research and knowledge transfer activities of our research institution. So what we did is, based on the self-understanding and the unique selling proposition of the Museum of Natural Sciences, we tried to figure out which of the 17 sustainable goals come as close as possible to the core business of the museum, which in this case was mostly SDG 14 and 15, which is about life underwater and life on Earth. And if you go through the goals and sub-goals and indicators, for instance, in the SDG 15, life on Earth, you find, for instance, explicitly indicators with regard to biodiversity. Well, of course, it's not possible that a single research institution solves any issue with regard to biodiversity, but at least it can work into this direction. And the way how we are doing this is that we are following the so-called theory of change, which is more, I'm not sure whether it is really a theory, it's more or less a way of thinking, which means that we are starting with an impact area we would like to contribute to, as I said, SDGs number 14 and 15. And then we have been starting to think about, well, which target groups, which stakeholders, which audiences do we need to achieve, to convince, to talk with, in order to work into the direction of our intended impact goals. And based on that, we were thinking about, well, what do we have to achieve among these stakeholders, target groups, and audience, which mostly has to do with creating attention, creating awareness, providing knowledge, and enable decisions. And then we have to ask ourselves, which knowledge transfer instruments do help mostly to convince, to inform, to create awareness among our targeted stakeholder groups and audiences. And then we thought, well, which pieces of research, with which research results and competences we should feed into our knowledge transfer activities. This is the way we have been thinking about what we are doing. And having that said, we discovered that it is definitely not easy to come up with simply measurable indicators. So what we did is, along I would say the value chain that the theory of change is providing, we came up with some indicators that help to explain that we are on the right way, which requires two things. First of all, we need a narrative that connects, if I jump back, that connects the impact area we would like to be part of changes, and we would like to influence. We need to connect this area with the audiences and the activities that are necessary, which means, for instance, that we are now organizing very focused workshops. And if you are talking, for instance, about workshops and conferences, usually the number of people, the number of attendees is seen as a success indicator. If you're running a conference and you do have 1,000 visitors, 1,000 attendees, it is seen as a success. In our case, we had organized, for instance, a workshop where we had 10 people attending, 10, which is less than 1,000, but it was much more important, it was much more valuable than 1,000 visitors in a conference, because these 10 people were exactly those who were in charge of preparing a new legislation that was relevant for us. So sometimes less is more, and this success indicator is only valid if you are able to explain the narrative and the story that is behind it. Second thing is, not everything that is measurable is helpful. As I said, the number of attendees is sometimes needless. If less is more, and then it means you have to more, the British say, capture, which means not simply measure, but get some data and know about why you are getting them. How did we get there? Well, you cannot read what is on this slide, but it should simply explain that there is a strategic approach required, which consists all the parts that are relevant, or for all the recipes that are relevant in order to cook a meal. In this case, we started with the administration, with the directorate of the museum, and then we had to convince academics, students, department heads, of course the administration, and it is a long way that we have to go. And some of these lessons learned during this pathway are, as I said, more capturing, less measuring, because measuring is sometimes misleading. For instance, the number of patents doesn't tell of anything. And as I said before, less is sometimes more, with regard to this example I had with the conference with many attendees and a workshop with less attendees. Sometimes less is more. And of course, this is a sad truth. There are a lot of methodological issues, and working together with academics means we have to face them all. For instance, time lag. We will never ever be able to demonstrate the impact by a change of the impact indicator in the biodiversity area of SDG number 15 within the next 1, 5, 10, or even 20 years, because the contribution of the museum is too small with regard to its research. But on the other hand, it is working into this direction. So we do have these methodological issues, which also means that we do have to stand a lot of uncertainties. We are able to explain what we are doing and why, but we will never ever be able to demonstrate evidence, at least not in a short term. And of course, it is necessary it's necessary to convince a lot of people, not only internally but externally. For instance, I was mentioning the politicians that are always visiting the Director General of the museum. For them, it is much easier to count the number of spin hours, for instance, but they do have nothing to do with the kind of impact culture which is necessary, by the way, also in order to motivate the academics. Because academics, when it comes to knowledge transfer and technology transfer, they are only in a very few cases motivated by commercializing their research. But almost every single one of them will say yes, and does say yes if you say, do you want to contribute by your research to make the world a better place? Yes, everybody says yes. And finally, we have to develop narratives to connect indicators, which always causes questions. But on the other hand, if you don't do it, you are not able to explain any kind of success on your pathway to impact. And having that said, I have to say, well, no, it's not perfect what we are doing, but at least it is an opportunity to include impact and the Sustainable Development Goals into the world of research. And despite of all these uncertainties, I have to say that it feels so right to do so. And every single issue we do have, every single problem that is coming up, we are trying to solve, but we are still feeling that we are on the right way. Therefore, you see, the mind is a prison without bars. Let's just escape, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christoph. That was definitely very, very interesting. And again, we have space for questions, so I would leave to my colleagues if they would like to ask.
Hello, I think I would have a common question. I really liked how you said that from your experience, it's important to really focus on capturing rather than measuring. Well, not rather than, but more thinking about how to really focus on important things, but not only on things that we can measure. I think this is really, really important, and I think it's also why, for example, in the concept of planetary boundaries, you even have the boundaries for which you don't have the numbers yet. And I think this is something maybe we, even at Charles University, now kind of reflecting back on our strategy, should think twice about when we are making the final version, about whether we actually have things there that matter rather than things that we can easily measure. So thank you for that insight that I think I will take away from your presentation today.
Thank you very much for this comment, and I can tell you it's sometimes really a nightmare to talk to people about this, because measuring things is so much easier. But perhaps you are aware of the streetlight effect, which is about the drunken guy who is looking his keys under a streetlight, and he's asked by a policeman, "What are you doing there?" And he's saying, "Well, I'm looking for my keys." Did you lost them there? No, I didn't lose them elsewhere, but here the light is better. You know, that is what measuring is quite often about. I do not want to vote against measuring in total, but I just would like to make you aware of the fact that measuring does not always tell the truth about what you would like to achieve. And including the Sustainable Development Goals into the impact agenda of research institutions does meet a need that is growing in science and academia all over Europe. And to use impact and SDGs not only as a justification for the existence of research and as an instrument that justifies the money that is spent for research is really necessary, because otherwise you will not get the acceptance of impact and knowledge transfer and all the other things among the academics. And this is the group I am working with. For instance, recently we had we did an exercise with your new ombudsman. She was in a workshop we were conducting at Charles University about impact, and we call it the case. And what we did is we tried to figure out how her research is related to Sustainable Development Goals. And believe it or not, it was possible to explain a relation between her research and Sustainable Development Goals, including an idea in which way she would or could contribute to the selected SDGs based on her research. And we did the same exercise in certain universities in the UK, for instance, in Cardiff or in Leicester or in Kent, and the experience was the same. We used the concept of impact together with the Sustainable Development Goals in order to materialize, to demonstrate the true impact and the true contribution that research might have with regard to make the world a better place. And this motivates the researchers. That was the background of my questioning during your previous presentation.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We have space for maybe one or few more questions. It's definitely very interesting to also hear this again. But as you see, I mean, now the sustainability agenda and SDGs and all these things are they are very in, I would say now. Everyone's talking about them. Everyone's trying to put all these new, not necessarily new, but existing approaches and tools and frames into their also university strategies. And but what you see, it's maybe little bit theoretical question. What you envision as a next? What will happen in 1 or 2 years? Because I mean, now everyone is trying to kind of adopt all these things and digest. And you are definitely a little bit further in thinking. But Are you thinking, what you think are the challenges and opportunities also in all this? I know well, it's very complex and there are several things, but I'm also myself thinking, what's next? What happens in 1-2 years? You know what?
I can tell you what I'm going to do, and which is I'm just one, but I have joined forces with some colleagues coming from the UK, and we are trying to disseminate this way of thinking about impact and the sustainable development goals as we are doing it in Berlin. So meanwhile, we are in negotiations with universities about that. And if you have a look, for instance, at universities in the Netherlands, for instance, Groningen, they also do have an impact strategy which includes research. And as I said earlier, I really appreciate what you're doing at Charles University with regard to improving administrative activities with regard to sustainable development goals. This is really necessary and helpful. But when it comes to the researchers, which are the core asset of any research organization, we need to convince them. And it was said earlier, we are not able to put pressure on them, so we have to motivate them. And this motivation to make the world a better place really works. And sustainable development goals are a framework in order to describe what we do have in mind when we are talking about a better world. And we have to be a bit careful that we do not try to put all the 17 goals onto one researcher, but we have to connect the research and selected sustainable development goals in order to make everything somehow doable. And that, for me, it's a step-by-step approach that we will have to go in order to follow this strategy we have been starting with the Museum of Natural Sciences in Berlin. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope I did not bore you, and because I did have another angle on the topic, but that's at least what I can contribute based on my work I'm doing here, Germany and parts of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. My colleague would like to comment, so I think we have just one more.
Just a little bit to add on that. I think I really enjoyed your presentation. I think it was really important to bring in the research aspect, because we are an institution that primarily focuses on education and research. That's our mission, basically. So, and I have to admit that when we were actually focusing on the strategy, we put a lot of effort in the operations and so on. But we're also aware that, of course, research and education and other things are very important. And we weren't quite sure how to approach that, exactly for the reasons that you're talking about, because of the academic freedoms, and you have to motivate the people. You can't just tell them, now you will work on sustainability, you know? So I think this is really important, and it kind of sparks my thinking about how we could possibly approach this to get people more on board and explain why it is important to their research and to what they're doing. So thank you very much for your contribution.
If I just may add, thank you very much for saying that, but if I would like to add just one more point. I will be in Prague next month, so why not catching up and having a coffee talking about that? I will be there from 19th till 21st of April.
Let's catch up. Yes, let's do that.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the offer.
Drop me a line where and when we might meet, and Hubert has got my contact details, so
great.
It would be
Thank
great
you very much.
to see.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Christoph, and
thank you.
We'll definitely be in touch. I believe we have our next speaker, Justyna Szczepanik from University of Warsaw.
Thank you for inviting me today. I will start with a quick introduction. My name is Justyna Szczepanik, and I work at University of Warsaw. I'm coordinating a project related to sustainable development and climate change. And my main area, the main area of my interest is enhancing climate and sustainable innovation. As you can see, the University of Warsaw was founded in 19th century. Our university is the largest university in Poland when it comes to the number of students. Each year we have over 40,000 undergraduate and graduate students and 2,000 doctoral candidates, for example. Of course, the overall number of students and doctoral candidates at the university includes international students. Half of them is academics in academic exchange programs such as Erasmus+. We have 24 faculties, interdisciplinary units, and academic and research centers. Doctoral candidates are educated at 4 doctoral schools. We have over 3,000 staff, including over 500 professors teaching students. And the wide range of study options cover programs in the humanities and the social, exact, and natural sciences. These are the numbers about our university. As you can see, we have the first place in the national rankings of universities. About sustainable development, it's important that we are member of a few EITs. The European Institute of Innovation and Technology is an independent EU body. We increase European ability to innovate by supporting new ideas and enhancing the innovation. The mission of the EITs is, for example, supporting sustainable development and job creation by promoting cooperation among leaders, businesses, education, and research organization. We are the member of the 3 of EITs, EIT Food, EIT Climate-KIC, and EIT Raw Materials. EIT Climate-KIC is a knowledge and innovation community working to accelerate the transition to zero carbon climate resilient society. And it's important that they identified and support innovation that helps society mitigate and adapt to climate change. These are a few figures from the EIT Climate-KIC. They're quite impressive. While cooperating with this consortium, we manage a few important projects related to sustainable development and climate change. One of them was focusing on enhancing climate innovation mindset in the education system of CE. The project aims to change the education system in the V4 countries in regards to environmental education. to empower students with innovative mindset and increased level of their creativity. The impact we achieved can be multiplied by scaling the recommendation all over the 4 countries in upcoming years. The methodology and concept can be repeated and spread region-wide. Another project we managed was the Community Lab, a comprehensive answer to climate resilience challenges faced in the Central and Eastern Europe. The purpose of the Community Lab was to generate climate positive impact. We aimed at testing different options and solutions which would allow us to work with partners and collaborators in this region in the new, different and more flexible ways. The 3 overarching challenges that are going to be addressed by different experiments were identified as unlocking new ways of thinking and working to make impact, addressing lack of collaboration and low level of trust, and financial innovations addressing climate emergency. Each of these challenges were called like streams. The first 2 challenges was to develop new alliances that build a community, and the third was about to find new resources to be more sustainable and as a university. We also are the member of EIT Food, and EIT Food is the world's largest and most dynamic food innovation community. We are coordinating 14 projects which are financed by this consortium, and most of them are related to sustainable development and SDGs goals. For example, we educate students and professionals about food systems through advanced training programs. We also enhance sustainability through research, for example, developing solutions to transform the traditional product use dispose model into a circular one. These few projects are coordinated by University of Warsaw. Of course, we have all of much more activities which are related to sustainable development and climate change. But I think that these ones are the most important for us. If you have any questions to these projects, please give me some information.
Thank you very much, Justyna. Maybe I'll be interested to know what were the challenges promoting, either these projects or the sustainability agenda or SDGs among your university. If you have information, or if you could talk about that, how easy or how difficult it is to talk about the sustainability on University of Warsaw.
Yes, of course. The biggest challenge is to change the infrastructure at our university. We have a lot of plans about how to be more sustainable and green, but the resources are limited, of course. We also plan to improve our community of students and doctors and try to involve them in new activities that are related to sustainable development. But it is also a challenge for us because we have a lot community to engage. The third challenge is to cooperate with national authorities, which is not, and local authorities as well. So I think that three challenges are the most important for us.
Well, thank you. I'll see if we have more questions. Maybe the same question as I asked my colleagues from Charles University about engagement of students. You know, how you engage students in the process or in the project, and how they are aware about what's going on the university.
We have a lot of activities for them. For example, sustainable events which are organized at the different faculties and in different ways. So that's the first option. The second one is to improve their skills, green skills, to be more resilient and sustainable in their actions. And we prepare a lot of new lectures about that.
Thank you very much. I would like to answer about the structure of your university. If you get some sustainable office, sustainable team, do you have a manager of sustainable development or something like this?
We have a few offices that are managed to do some sustainable development researchers, and one of them is the Office of Advisement, in which I working. So we have also some studies at the different faculties, and they are managed by the offices in their faculties. So our actions are spread in the whole university.
Okay, hello Justyna. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering, for both the food and the climate community, you talked about this community lab for climate education. Could you maybe say a little bit more about like what are the things that we could, for example, use and get inspired about? So is there like a website to which we could go and explore what you already did, or what stage is this project that you talked about? Where are you and where are you heading next, maybe? Thank you.
Yes, of course. There is a website of this project. I could send it to you right away. This project is concentrating on the few topics. The last year, it was about sustainable diets and agriculture, retrofit and reduction, and building a community. And this year was about just transition. So we built a new community of experts, which is working on each topic right now. So if you want to contact some other organizations or some other experts which are involved in this project, let me know and I will send the contacts to you. The first thing about unlocking new ways of thinking, this topic is more about critical thinking's green skills and abilities to adapt to climate change, for example. And the second, about building up trust, is experimental tool, what we should deal with engaging citizens, NGOs, business and public authorities to tackle climate change. And the third theme is about creating financial independence about green and sustainable issues that we could use and build some climate funds, including some future operations of communities to achieve our goals in a sustainable way.
Great, thank you very much for that. I will definitely follow up on that, so expect an email from me. Thank you.
I can see that our next speaker from the University of Manchester is already connected. We are a little bit ahead of time, but that doesn't matter because it will give us more space to ask questions at the end, or actually give you more space to to present. So thank you very much, Dr. Julian. I hope I'll pronounce your name right. Skyrme?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe you're the director of the social responsibility at the University of Manchester. So please go ahead. It's great to have you. And if you are ready, you can start.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real privilege to be able to speak to you today. So thanks very much for inviting me along. I just wanted to check I can see you very well in my window. You can hear me okay? I'm perfectly audible? Yep.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to share some slides with you in a moment. I wanted to just, sort of, before I start sharing my slides, just say a bit about who I am and what I plan to do today in the 20 or so minutes. So I'm Julian Skyrme, as you said. I'm the Director of Social Responsibility, which is a role in the professional services, the management part of our university. And I've been doing this role for around 10 years. I'm the first director of this area, the founding director of social responsibility. So what I wanted to do today, I know you wanted me to talk about SDGs, which I certainly will do, but I also want to place that in the context of the past decade of progress we've been making before the SDGs came along, and will hopefully equip us to take on what will succeed the SDGs after 2030 as well, because one of the key points I want to make today is that strategy is really important within your university and where you place SDGs. And from that strategy, a range of quite structural things need to happen around how you think about this agenda and respond to it at its most fundamental level in terms of the purpose of a university today. So let me, is that okay by way of introduction? What I'd like to do then is share my slides. So just bear with me while I do this. So in terms of, I'm just finding where I click on the slides. Okay, so what am I going to do then? I'm going to give you 7 Ps, just to use some alliteration, about how I'm going to go through this. I'm going to talk about the past, our sense of purpose today, our sense of place, how we think about people connected to this agenda, some of our plans and priorities, the programs we do, and our performance. I'm going to do all of that in 20 minutes. So hopefully you'll have time for questions. Things I refer to, I will share links to afterwards so that anybody listening to this can follow things up if you wish. So I'll make sure I share all of the links to anything I refer to. So just to start off to say that in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, on one level, we might say all university rankings are flawed. They all have particular methodological weaknesses. We like this one at the University of Manchester because we do well in it, of course. We all like rankings, perhaps, that we do well in. But there's a serious point to this, that I think these rankings around the Sustainable Development Goals, for me at least, try to change the way we thought about rankings. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of rankings. I think they may have done more harm than good overall. But if we're going to live in a world of rankings, I didn't invent them and I can't change this. If we are going to have rankings, I think at least try and measure things that matter. And relating universities' endeavours to the goals of the world rather than our own internal wishes for what we think is important, at least is the right way round to think about these things. And we've consistently, as the University of Manchester, we've been 3rd, 8th, 1st and 9th in the world since these rankings began. And we didn't know we'd feature so well in 2019 when these were first developed. And many people have asked, well, how have you done so well in these rankings? And it's not an easy answer, but maybe in my presentation it might point towards some clues at least. So we're really proud of our performance in these, I think it's fair to say. So all of this comes from the past, I think. Any university, particularly one like mine that's been around nearly 200 years, has a particular past. So we were established in 1824. We were the first of these civic universities developed outside of London. At the time, you had to have religious tests for entry in the UK, but we were open to all regardless of religion. We were the world's first industrial city in Manchester. We were known as Cottonopolis. We developed the first free public library in the world, Britain's first canals and railways, the birthplace of the vegetarian movement, the global cooperative movement, the British trade union movement, the first professional football club. Women's suffrage began in Manchester with the Pankhurst family. So a lot of important social movements come out of our city, and the university is part of that. Our model is based on, and I think this will resonate perhaps to the audience today, this German model of the university, the practical research university. At the time, many of the universities like Oxford and Cambridge were teaching universities, very little relationship of research to teaching. We were born out of this practical need that research must have a social benefit. And I think if there's 3 things I point to that are famous in my university, the picture in the slide there is Rutherford and Geiger together in a building very close to where I am now on campus. And Rutherford did the work that led to the splitting of the atom at Manchester. We developed the first computer, Williams and Kilburn, that could store memory. They developed that computer. That was developed after them by Alan Turing, who worked at Manchester as well and developed the first commercial computer. And we also isolated graphene and have the Nobel Prize for Physics for isolating this amazing 2D material. And we are considered to be the world centre of graphene research. Our university motto, we always like to use Latin in British universities for historical reasons, and Cognitio Sapientia Humanitas, which is knowledge, wisdom, humanity. And that really relates to why I'm sat here today, our 3 core goals as a university, because the knowledge is our first goal of research. The wisdom, passing that knowledge on to future generations, is our teaching and learning goal, our second goal. But the humanity is this 3rd goal of social responsibility, which I have the privilege of being director of. And that's unique in British higher education, to have a university which has social responsibility as one of its 3 core goals. Why did we do this? Well, it wasn't an accident. As you can see from the type of city my university is based in, the type of university that's had wonderful discoveries in history, we've always been committed to social responsibility and the wider issue of sustainable development of societies. We think it's in our DNA. We also think the language of social responsibility is a good counterweight to the neoliberal or more individualistic model of universities. In the UK, people think often about universities as a private benefit. You go there, it costs an awful lot of money now. You invest in something, you invest in your own human capital, and then you go on to earn more as a consequence. A very individualistic model. We think universities do so much more than this, and that's important. It's also a rallying call. When we think about research and teaching, we often think of excellence, what we're good at. However, social responsibility, we think, asks a different question. What are we good for? What is the purpose of a university today in society? And it's certainly not just about private benefit of individuals. Also, I think this resonates in your part of the world around skepticism and populism, which we've seen in Eastern Europe. We've seen it certainly in Western Europe. We've seen it in the global South. The role of populism in the world. And I think this idea of public benefit of universities is a really important counterweight to this, and speaking truth to power, using evidence, using informed debate, defending freedom of speech, even when that's really difficult to do. These things are really important. They're public functions of universities. And also we think social responsibility makes educational sense. One of my favorite quotes ever on education is from Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders of the United States. And he said, the great aim and end of all learning is service to society. And I think it's a wonderful way to think about education, not being a goal in and of itself, an individual goal, but something that has social benefit. So how do we think about this in terms of social responsibility and indeed the SDGs then? Well, for us, this agenda, it's both a set of values then, as you can see, but a unifying theme that gives purpose to our university, but it's also a bunch of practical, measurable activities that we can deliver. And when we think about our strategy of social responsibility, we can deliver this in 4 ways. Think about the issue of climate change. How can you attack this, address this as a university? You can do it in 4 ways. Through your research as a university, finding out new knowledge about this issue, passing that knowledge on to future generations through your learning and your students, engaging the public with these issues, going out into society, contributing to informed public debate on these issues with the public, with policymakers, with young people, with the media, etc. And then also then thinking through your university operations. And really the Sustainable Development Goals, these 17 goals, you can attack those in these 4 ways as a university. So when the SDGs came along in 2016, it was the same principle. We can approach this in those 4 ways. And take the climate crisis. Our own universities emit huge amounts of carbon, of course, particularly if you do energy intensive research. So you can research these issues, you can pass them on to your students, engage the public, and think about how you operate as a sizable organization in your city or region as a university as well. So we have a phrase in the UK, charity begins at home. I don't know if that translates in your context, but I think social responsibility also begins at home. It begins on your own campus, if you like, about the type of people you employ, how you spend your money, how you think about your estate. So the campus is one focal point of place. We're based on an innovation corridor where there's a number of universities and hospitals and spin-out companies called the Oxford Road Corridor. We're based in the city of Manchester, which is in this region called Greater Manchester, which is around 3 million people in our region. We have the broader northwest of the UK, where things like the Lake District are, and Liverpool, as well as a city, for example, in the northwest, the broader region. We are based nationally in the UK. You could think of national as England or the UK in our context. Certainly we're part of the world. We have students from every part of the world in our university. And even we have we invented radio astronomy in the UK context, a steerable radio telescope technology. We developed that in the 1940s and 50s in Manchester. So even into outer space, we do social responsibility as well, gazing at the stars and thinking about our existence and how long we've been around as a civilization. So let me say fourthly something about people. Our President and Vice Chancellor, Dame Nancy Rothwell, she personally led this agenda. When she was appointed in 2010, she created these 3 goals. I became the first director in 2013, and we created a vice president position then on our senior leadership team, which was James, until more recently Nalin came along in 2019. So really, Nancy leads the institution. We have a vice president who's an academic who sits on the senior leadership team. That's Nalin currently. And myself, I spend 100% of my time on this, and I work full time on this. Nalin is also an academic. He's a consultant histopathologist. He works in laboratories, and his research is in the area of cancer, for example. So, but my area, I run a small professional team, and our job is to work across the whole university to embed social responsibility and the SDGs. So let me say a bit about, we have a strategy, and I'll send you links to this, which tells you at the highest level about what we're trying to do as a university. And underneath that, we also have a plan for social responsibility where you find our references to SDGs and other things. We have a plan as well. Our plan has 5 big themes in it, which are designed to stand the test of time. These are enduring social issues and challenges for us in the 21st century. One of fairness and inclusion, one of prosperity, one of health, engaging people through culture, and also creating a more sustainable world. So there are 5 big areas of focus. They cut across the SDGs, of course. Let me tell you then about what sits across all of those 5 priorities. We have a commitment to partnership. That's definitely in terms of our partnership with people through the SDGs, but also working closely with local, national and global partnerships, right from the very local through to working with partners around the world with other universities, and certainly with NGOs and governments and companies that exist right across the planet. We put a lot of emphasis on focusing, measuring and communicating our impact, and I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. We have a range of different programs. I won't go through the detail of all of these, but just to say some significant things, I think, is that we're committed to being zero carbon, not just as a university, but as a whole city region in Greater Manchester by 2038. That's our own mayor, our elected mayor, who oversees a range of devolved powers across the 3 million people that live in Greater Manchester. He's called Andy Burnham. And Andy Burnham, he developed this strategy to be zero carbon as a city region by 2038. And as a university, we are committed not just to achieving that ourselves, we also fed into the science. So the reason we picked 2038 is this is a science-based target based on using the Paris Agreement of staying within a safe amount of climate change, 1.5 degrees, and thinking, what does that mean in terms of our fair share in Greater Manchester to this global challenge of keeping emissions within that limit? So it's a science-based target for our city region. I like this quote. A couple of surgeons doing some work, great surgery, but shame the patient died. I think we often think about universities like this, about our programs. And for us then as a university, we've been thinking, how do you evaluate and embed some success measures in this? So we do this at the highest level of the university. Here are 8 different measures which our board, who oversee our university, look in terms of our progress. So, for example, we want 95% of our staff to say we're a good place to work. We want to be a top 25 research university in the world. Our 2038 target for zero carbon is in there. But we also have this impact on society measure, which has 2 things in there, which is significant to share with you today. In there's a couple of measures. First is to be within the top 2% of universities in the world for our impact towards the SDGs, because we think that's so important for us. And secondly, to be in the top 10%, that's the very top level, in terms of public and community engagement. And that's a national measure where all universities are placed in one of 10 different deciles. So we measure this at the very highest level within the university. This isn't an add-on, a nice to do, or separate to the other important work we do in the university. This is absolutely embedded, and this has a colour, either red, amber or green, which our board look at, and they focus on the reds, obviously, and I'm pleased to say we've always been green. We're exceeding our targets on that at the moment in terms of those 2 measures. I talked about gazing into the stars, which certainly a lot of our researchers do at Manchester, but anybody that knows the basic things about astronomy might notice this gentleman here is doing something different. He's looking through the wrong end, of course, of that telescope. And I think for me, the SDGs are a good analogy for this, because universities, I'm sure lots of you in the audience listening to this today will empathise with this point. We're very good at developing quite esoteric sounding things like faculties and schools and research centres, and we're brilliant at using language that nobody else can understand. We're great at talking inwards to ourselves, and we're very poor, therefore, in the main, I think, right across the world, my own university included, at connecting what we do to the real concerns of people in their everyday lives. And I think the SDGs for Manchester are a real opportunity to look from the outside in and think, really, rather than thinking about the language and the structures we use within the University of Manchester, think about what does the world need, first of all, not just from universities, what does the world need to survive and to thrive? And of course, there's no better exposition of this in history, I think, than the 17 goals expressed by the SDGs. They're not perfect, of course they're not. And anybody that studies the SDGs can point out lots of gaps, lots of holes, lots of unintended consequences, and say that this is a dressing exercise and we're not going to meet many of them. However, it is the biggest strategy that's ever been created. It's involved the most number of countries, the most number of people of any strategy in the world to date. And there's a reasonable amount of democracy in there. It's not perfect, but it has ensured, compared to the Millennium Development Goals at least, they've been developed with much more input from people in the global south who are often disproportionately affected by many of the issues of equity and climate change in the world. So for us, these SDGs are important. As you know, there's 17 of them with 169 targets, 223 indicators. And we started before the Times Higher came along and did this much better than we were able to do. We started to map our activities and found it was quite difficult in some cases to think, how does that SDG relate to the work of a university? And actually, the Times Higher have done this work, as imperfect as I think this is as well. It's a good attempt, at least, to start not with what universities want to talk about, but what do we want to talk about at global level? So they take those measures, of course, and since over these 4 years, we've been tracking our progress, and ourselves and the University of Auckland are the only 2 universities in the world to appear in those top 10 of universities across the 4 years that they've been in existence. And our performance has been fairly stable over that time, which suggests we're doing something good. So in terms of these SDGs, I mentioned earlier, these are the 4 ways in which you can attack them. Let me just finish by giving you some examples specifically on the SDGs across these 4 areas. So I'll take research first, number 1. So in terms of research, we've produced, and I'll share a link to this afterwards. We've got lots of data on our research outputs according to the SDGs, the number of publications, the number of patents that we've got across those, the proportion of work we're doing with low and middle income countries, for example, the number of co-authors we've got with people in different parts of the world, the number of policies we've had an impact on across these SDGs. So we collect lots of data on this. And in terms of the number of publications, by far the most we have is SDG 3, good health and well-being, because it's a more prolific area of research, and I think that would be the case for other universities like Manchester. I think we've also got this really interesting database within the university called Research Explorer, which uses a system called Pure, and it links, you can search our research by each of the SDGs using bibliometrics. So that's at the macro level. At the micro level, one of our researchers, a professor of human geography I've used as an example, a colleague of mine, James, you can look at his research profile and you can see these 8 SDGs that James is working towards in terms of his publications. So that's just an example of some of the things we're doing to think about the relationship of research to SDGs in both the macro level, the data we have, but also that micro level, how people are linking into this. In terms of learning and students, one of the most humbling quotes I've read about students is by Orr, who says, I think this is really profound, the destruction of the planet is not the work of ignorant people, it's largely the result of work by people with BAs, BScs, LLBs, MBAs and PhDs. Education can equip people to be more effective vandals of the earth. And I think that shows that the education we offer in university is absolutely critical. If we want to be neutral in this agenda, we will contribute harm in the world as universities. Just think about that. If we're neutral in this, we have to be a force for positive change in the type of teaching that we do and the educational offer. We've been thinking at Manchester, when you search for an academic program, if you were thinking of studying at our university, you can now look at, if you wanted to study this program, which is a BEng, an engineering program, this links to Sustainable Development Goals 7, 9, 11, 12 and 13. So we are saying that if you want to study at Manchester, you can not only get a good job, but think about how you can contribute to making the world a better place, even before you come to Manchester. When you come here, we have a range of programs. This is one example, which is an interdisciplinary unit we've developed, which students can take on the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. In terms of public engagement, we have a fabulous university museum here, a university art gallery, a university public library, a university science centre where our radio telescope is that looks into space. And we also have an initiative called Creative Manchester. Now, across these public institutions, we have more than 1 million public visitors each year. And these are very much engaged in issues of sustainability and equity. So they're very values-driven institutions that create debate with the public, using our research and knowledge and sharing that and using it to inform public discourse. And then in terms of our university operations, we have a very good publication, which we do every couple of years on the SDGs, and I'll share a link to that. We have an initiative called 50,000 Actions where staff can sign up to do things across the university, to take action. So in terms of buying things which are fair trade and ethically sourced on campus, for example, and which SDGs those actions relate to. And you can log in as an individual member of staff and you can look at how you're doing compared to others. So it creates a bit of friendly competition between staff. So I'll finish up. The lessons we've learned then, thinking about these issues for the past 10 years, the past is really important. Our own historical context, we all have. My context, what I've said at Manchester, is unique to us, but all of you will have your own way of relating the challenge of sustainable development to the type of values of our own institutions. Our sense of purpose as well, how this really has to fit into a university strategy. And we like to think of this idea of the outside in rather than the inside out, thinking what does the world need and how can a university orientate itself to what the public needs from universities. In terms of a sense of place, we are these unique institutions, I think, universities. We're both local and global. And I think this is a really powerful type of institution to be addressing issues of sustainable development, therefore. People, we have made key academic and professional appointments around this agenda. So hopefully you can see that's been a feature at Manchester. Our priorities, holding a mirror up on ourselves, not just thinking what we can do to the world and with the world, but also how do we operate ourselves? What's our own carbon footprint? What do we pay our lowest members of staff, for example? So there's issues in how we are organised ourselves as universities. Having programmes that can deliver measurable results is important, and relating that then to how you think about performance of the university, I think is key embedding that. So that's my brief whistle-stop overview. I'll share a link to all of these slides and the publications, and I'll really look forward to any feedback and keeping the conversation going. So I'm going to try and unshare my slides now, and I can see people's faces again, which will be nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. That was very, very interesting. I'm sure there are hundreds of questions, and at least in my head, I see there's one question or maybe two questions, Slido. So maybe we can start with that. The question is: could you tell more about work with communities? And it continues, how you measure impact. So I believe those are two questions, but maybe they are linked. So your work with communities and how you measure impact.
Yeah, thank you. So our work with communities is a really important feature of the university's strategy. We talk about civic engagement when we think about working with communities, and it's interesting, the concept of civic can mean two things really in the English language: a sense of place, the idea of a civic centre or a civic library. So it can often mean a town or a city, but also to be civically minded means to be public spirited, to have a responsibility towards others and towards your community. And the role of communities is really important. There are communities of place, of course, which we all have around the world. In terms of universities, they tend to be most likely to be situated in cities and towns, large urban areas. Not exclusively. In the UK, we have some universities in the countryside, but in the main around the world, you find universities are very much connected to their places. But there's also communities of interest and identity as well. So how do we think about our work with, for example, South Asian communities in the context of Manchester, or older people, groups of people who perhaps no longer work and are living out a particular period of life towards the end of their lives and have particular needs and challenges. So we think about communities in a very broad sense. I think in Manchester, we have a disproportionate engagement with less advantaged communities. So if we can do something positive, it's working with people who don't traditionally engage with universities or see the relevance of universities. So we try and do the most difficult work deliberately. And I think you have to do this not by expecting people to come to us and value us, but you have to go to them and take. So I use the example of the South Asian communities. This has been it's the largest ethnic group in Greater Manchester outside of the white population. Because Britain's colonial history, there's a lot of, obviously we had an empire and the relationship to India was important. And since the 1950s and 60s, lots of people came from India and what then later became Pakistan and Bangladesh. And there's huge South Asian communities. My children, for example, go to a school very close by, which is 55, 60% South Asian. And that will be a feature of many neighbourhoods in Manchester. To engage with that community, for example, as a university, we built Britain's first permanent gallery of South Asian culture within our university museum. So instead of expecting communities to come to us without changing ourselves, we've decided to think about the very content, the substance of what we do, to engage with communities. That's really important. If we want to work with older people, how can we be more age friendly in the way we think about our work? So communities, I think, is a big question, but I think the key issue for us has been working with less advantaged communities, people who don't engage with the university as much, and thinking about the substance and the content of what we do, not expecting to just do the same thing and expect people to engage with us. The bit about measurement is really important, and this is where, despite not being a fan of rankings, I've said this several times now, I do think they played a really important role, not just externally in terms of more universities now having to think about the Sustainable Development Goals. More than 1,400 universities around the world engage in this exercise. That's 1,400 conversations maybe internally that weren't happening, and that's the important thing. The visibility. These rankings landed in an institution like mine that can sometimes be slightly obsessed with rankings because we do quite well in them overall as a university. We're professional at working out how they measure things. We have various committees and ways of thinking about rankings internally. So when something that has such a prestige as the Times Higher Education comes along and says, we're now using the SDGs in this ranking, that's had a big impact in terms of some people in my university who perhaps they don't get out of bed in the morning and think of sustainable development. That's not the first thing they think of. But they do think about our reputation and our performance and our quality and our standing in the world. And it's broadened the conversation, I think, around the Sustainable Development Goals. Almost everybody in my university now knows a bit about them, and they didn't before. And I think the rankings have played a modest but important role in increasing that visibility. So measurement, we definitely look at those because they're helpful. But we measured these sorts of things before these rankings came along, and if they were scrapped tomorrow, we would have to find some things to replace them, of which we're fairly confident we've got those internal measures, because what they're trying to measure are broadly the right things. They're trying to measure not just quality, but equality. They're trying to measure not just development in terms of its economic sense, but its sustainable sense as well. And they're trying to measure not just what a university is good at, as I said before, trying to measure what a university is good for. So they're trying to do, as imperfect as they are, they're trying to do the right things in my view. So if we are going to have measures and rankings, I think these ones are quite good ones. But of course, we do internally measure things like our carbon footprint, our equality and diversity measures, what amount of money we spend with local companies, what do we pay our lowest staff, is there a pay differential between men and women and black and white professors, all of those sorts of things. We measure those internally. So we have a scorecard of various metrics in my university.
Excellent. That was also very interesting, and we can definitely elaborate on that and have more questions, but I would like to ask my colleagues or anyone, we have space for about 2 more questions before our next speaker, and it's maybe a little bit unfortunate we don't have more time, but I hope there will be some interaction also in the future and we could share experience.
Okay, hello Julian, it's really a pleasure to hear all of the things that you're doing in Manchester. I think you're much more ahead of us, but at least we see there is an inspiration in the world for us to go to. And one of the things I wanted to ask about was this zero carbon for Greater Manchester by 2038. So I understand, if I understand it right, it's kind of the city region, including the university, all the buildings, everyone, everything in that region. And that came from the person leading that area, right? So how did this collaboration work? If you can follow up on that a little bit, explain. Because my question also relates to our situation, where we are creating the strategy for Charles University only, not for the wider region, but of course we're also thinking of how we impact the rest of the city and the rest of the region and so on. And we had quite a few discussions on the year, where you said 2038 is the scientific date for why you decided that. So that would be also one of the topics that if you could maybe clarify on that, where that number came from, who was involved. I'd be very much interested in that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's a brilliant question. So we have something called, in the UK, we have these things called Tyndall Centres for Climate Change. I think there's 5 of them, and Manchester is one of those. So we have scientists in our university who are experts on global emissions and carbon measurement, and they were involved. So when our mayor became the mayor, one of the first things he did was developed a commission about what Greater Manchester, within its devolved powers, could do as a city region in terms of setting itself a carbon reduction goal. And it's quite interesting in global terms as well. We all know academically that the biggest impact we can have on global emissions will be done at intergovernmental level. This needs global action, you know, on things like aviation, for example, and agriculture as two really good examples. But interestingly, the responsibility for climate change and the ambition around climate change is being developed most of all at city regional levels by mayors, particularly in the United States. You can see what California is doing, for example, which is way ahead of many European countries. So I think that's quite interesting, whereas the United States overall is way behind Europe. So it's interesting that mayors are having this very important role. So as a university, we saw this as a huge opportunity to not just engage and be told what to do by our mayor as the university, but actually to work with him to inform the scientific target for this. So I mean, I'm not an expert in climate change. You may know an awful lot more about me, but I know how to explain the basics of what we did, which is often the most important thing really to get across here. Is that we took, you know, what the global emissions would need to be to remain within 1.5 degrees. Now, as a world, you know, people talk about 2050, don't they? As where we look at, but anybody that works in this area knows it's not really about 2050 or indeed 2024. It's the total amount of carbon emitted over that period. And so what we did is, rather than use British national government policy, which looks at 2050 in the UK context, we didn't think that was scientifically credible as a city region. We wouldn't be playing our full role in meeting the Paris commitments by following UK government policy. And our mayor knew this, and he had devolved powers to do things sooner. And you've got this happening across other cities in the UK with different dates. And it's not to say that one date is right or wrong, and we shouldn't be obsessed with 2038 either. That is a date which gave a particular trajectory. It's about the amount of carbon that stays under that curve. So we could find ourselves, for example, we could become zero carbon in 2035, but still emit too much carbon, because we could blow our carbon budget in the next few years and then dramatically reduce it in later years. And actually we've emitted more carbon than by doing it in a more gradual pace by 2038. So people are obsessed with the date, I think, rather than the total amount of carbon. And anybody that researches this, of course, I'm teaching you to suck eggs in saying that, sorry. It's a really obvious point, but I think the public are often obsessed with the date. But for us, the important thing was to work to scientifically inform that target with the mayor, that's University of Manchester academics. It's a very close colleague of mine, Carly McLaughlin, who's an amazing professor of energy policy and carbon within our university. She's our carbon lead now, advising the university itself about its own carbon reduction plans. But it was Carly and her colleagues that worked with the mayor to develop that plan. And I would say that's the best example of research impact I can point to in the past 10 years in my university. It may not be the example that gets the biggest prize in terms of the British research assessment exercise that the government does, but in terms of significance of having an impact on people's lives, that I think is one of the best examples of what universities can do to make the world a better place through their research, is getting involved in that dirty, messy, complex work, which is about setting those very targets and then monitoring our progress towards those as well. So I can send you more information if you're interested. Please drop me an email and I can put you in touch with Carly as well if you've got a particular interest. But this is something I think I'm really proud of our university did, and I would always use it as an example of universities at their best, trying to address those complex issues, not theoretical issues, but really practical, messy issues about how you turn something global into a local target. And then, of course, how a university itself contributes towards that as well, because we are part of those emissions ourselves. It's not just about doing research, but also about how many of our academics are flying around the world, and where do we get our in terms of our supply chain? What about international student recruitment? All of these really difficult issues then flow from this as well.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
That was
great. I will get in touch. Thanks very much.
Unfortunately, our time ran out. We have a next speaker waiting, but thanks a lot. It was very, very interesting, and it would be great if we can be in touch and maybe have a similar discussion once again. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
Thank you very much.
Have a great day, and feel free to stay with us and listen to our next speaker, David from Sorbonne University. David, if you are already connected, David is a presidential advisor for sustainable development from Sorbonne University. And welcome.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me in order to present what we are making in Sorbonne University. So thank you very much. And so I will try to show you what we are making in Sorbonne University around sustainable development. And first of all, I want to present you what is Sorbonne University, because it's a quite young university finally, even if it's in fact fusion of all universities. So it's an association of Pierre and Marie Curie University and association of Paris Sorbonne University. So it was realized in 2018. Sorry. Our university is divided in 4 different regions in France, even if a majority of our campus and sites are in the center of Paris. We have 10,000 person working in the laboratory, in the administration, and the different parts of the university, and it's more than 50,000 students. And our organization, it's a division in 3 faculties, with Faculty of Science Engineering, the Faculty of Medicine, and the Faculty of Letters, Humanities. Sorbonne University is also an alliance, because in fact we include in our university the National Museum of Natural History, but also other other partners, as for example the University of Compiègne, but also some national institute, as for example the Scientific Research National Centers, CNRS, or the National Institute of Health and Medical Research. Sustainable development is very important in Sorbonne University, as well as the environmental transition. So we have a considerable strength on this issue, in research, in education. And it's a major challenge for us, because it's very important for the society, the university, and of course the actors of the university. Our idea of the sustainable development and the position of the university is that the university has to provide solutions, but also has to be an actor in the society. And so you will see that finally we are trying to, of course, find some solutions to have evolution in environmental problems and different questions around the climate and the pollution. But we are also very aware about the fact that we are also we have an impact on the society, an impact on the footprint of the society, and so we are trying to make action in order to reduce this footprint impact. In France, we have a very active national context around sustainable development. The government of Macron is trying to stimulate a lot these thematics, and so we can see that there is many new rules, many new systems in order to stimulate the development of sustainable development in different parts of the country, and to the new things that we discover in 2022. It's a new plan with the name of Climate, Biodiversity and Environment Ecological Transition for the Higher Education and Research Program that we have to develop and to apply for the next few years in the university in France. So it's a very active national context. And so the idea and what we are trying to make in Sorbonne University, it's to develop a kind of corporate social responsibility as it's already defined by the European Commission and in the world, and it's more for the companies, the private companies. And in France, we have a specific system for the university. We have a national label called Sustainable Development and Social Responsibility Label. It was created 8 years ago by a collective of universities and major big schools, but also under the responsibility of the ministry in charge of the sustainable development and in charge of the higher education, and also in relation with the networks of national student association for the sustainable development. So it's very, very interesting system that we are trying to use. This label, in fact, allow you to obtain a kind of labelization for 4 years, with, of course, a control at the middle time after 2 years. And the interest of this type of label is that there is finally an integration of the activities of education and research in the labelization. So it's quite original when you can compare with the other system, like for example, the classic labelization ISO 26000. And so we are trying to use finally this label as a specific repository for all our activities. And so in Sorbonne University, finally, we define an action plan following the 5 strategic axes that you can find in the labelization. So the strategy and the governance, training and teaching, research, environment, so it's a big part of the questions, and there is many things inside, but also action in social policy and territorial strategy. So I will try to just explain for this different chapter what we were making with some example. So, for example, for the strategy and the governance, the fact that we want to develop sustainable development push us to create new function and new assembly in the university in order to deal with this new issue. And so there is a very strong political engagement of our university with, for example, a vice president and also a presidential advisor, me, in order to stimulate and to develop all the action for the university. We have also a division with 3 faculties, and for each faculties we create a specific vice dean position in order to develop also the action of the university in the different faculties. And we also create a general assembly for sustainable development. And in this general assembly, we have, of course, vice dean, different members of the university, representative of the students, representative also of the service of the administration, expert, guest expert, in order to discuss all this action, all the different things that we have to develop in the university. The university also has a charter and action plan. So in October 2019, we developed the first charter in favor of ecologically and socially responsible university. So this charter was adopted by the board of directors in the university, and just after we developed an action plan. So based on the national ecological transition strategy of the France, but also based on the label and based on the ministry new biodiversity climate plan that we have to take care for the next years. About the strategy and governance, finally, globally, the philosophy, it's that we are trying to integrate the approach into all departments of the establishment and in all activities of our university. Raise the awareness and encourage the support of the staff of the establishment and students in a dynamic of sustainable practice. So we're working a lot about the good practice for the sustainable development. We are trying also to act with networks of regional and international actors. So in this case, of course, we are included in different international partnerships. And for Sorbonne University, for example, 4 years plus with the University of Charles and other collaborators. And we are also trying, in terms of strategy and governance, to communicate a lot with all stakeholders. In fact, we are considering that the university has a crucial role as a vector of information and awareness within, of course, its communities, but also the society and internationally. And so we are trying to play this role. About training and teaching, in fact, the global question is how to raise awareness and train on the challenge of ecological transition and sustainable development in higher education. In France, in fact, in 2022, we saw a big change. It was the year of change, since the ministry asked to our specialists to make an analysis of the offer in the educational program in a higher education system, and to establish if finally we have enough education of students on this question. So this report was led by 2 big specialists, Jean Jouzel, so it's one of the French climatologists, but also Luc Abadi, it's one of the specialists in biodiversity question. And the report carried out by the ministry finally led to a strong political position of our government this year, with a clear will of the ministry and around the fact that for 2025, all the university in France will have a compulsory education for the student on this issue, with a basic education program in order to teach sustainable development and environmental transition. So it's a big year of change, and so in Sorbonne University, how we take in consideration all that, we were already working on this question. So we worked previously in 2018 to 2021 on the creation of a common module on environmental transition, with the objective to allow all the students select this common module. And we are trying now to continue, of course, to amplify, since the ministry asked us to amplify this development. And so we are making now mapping work on the lesson, and to also identify how the lessons are associated with SDG. The development of also of new lessons and pooling strengths and disciplines. The development also of continuous training and training of our staff, because we realize that, of course, our staff, from the technician to the different professors, they are not aware about what is the climatic change problem, what is the problem of sustainable development. And we are trying also to develop some action for our students as eco-delegates for the different school, middle and high school students. And so we have many action with in Paris, for example, with different schools around our university. And of course, Sorbonne University, as a lot of university, has big strengths in the teaching and training in various disciplines. So in our 3 faculties, from geography to biodiversity to marine studies, or also in health with the development of some specific sustainable development modules in health. We have a lot of disciplines and a lot of specialists allowing us to develop such kind of offer. About research, the global philosophy is to promote and support research, interdisciplinarity, development and technology, transfer on this issue. So as for finally the education, we are making mapping of our strengths, and we are trying to associate the discipline to the SDG. We are also seeking funding and partnerships and promoting basic and applied research in these fields. And so as for the teaching, we have several laboratories and teams working in various fields of these thematics, geography, sociology, philosophy, earth science, life science, sustainable development in health. But we have also some specific institute with, for example, the Institute of the Environmental Transition, of the Institute of the Ocean. This institute are trying to put in synergy all the laboratory and to make very ambitious proposal of research with the association of different disciplines. And one thing also that we are trying to make the research, independently to this promotion finally of the research, we are trying also to allow the laboratory to make their own analysis of their footprint impact. And in France, we have a specific initiative called Laboratory 1.5. This initiative allows, with a specific algorithm, the calculation of the carbon impact of laboratory or also of a team. It can be realized at the level of a team of research. And it's very interesting because they can calculate directly their carbon impact, but also identify what can be the actions allowing the reduction of their carbon impact. And we can see in France that there is a lot of laboratory in a lot of university very interesting by this initiative because the calculation at the university level is very interesting, of course, but not enough precise and not allowing, in fact, local action. And so we are trying to stimulate and to develop a lot this type of initiative. For the environment, so as I said previously, in the axis of environment for the label, in fact, there is many categories. We are speaking, of course, about the environmental impact of the university and therefore the actions that we can implement in order to reduce this environmental impact. But we are also speaking about the layout of our campus and the workplace, but also the lifestyle and the good practice in the workplace. And so we are trying to make different action in order to develop this environmental axis. So some example, for example, the greenhouse gas balance it's mandatory in France for the university to realize it all the 3-4 years. So it's a reference barometer, of course. It's an analysis of our carbon impact. We made it for the years 2018. We are currently making it for the 2022 years. And you can see that it's very interesting because we can identify if we have a specific profiles in comparison to other university, but also identify what are currently the sectors that we have to work in order to reduce our impact. And so here I put just 3 very specific percentage showing what are the big work that we have to realize. First, the majority of our emission, it's around 60%, it's the service purchase. We buy a lot of different things, and the impact carbon of all this is very important. We have also a strong impact of our professional mobility. It's around 15%, but in fact, in comparison to other university and the national average, we are very low. Because in fact our specificity is that we have a university in the city, and with the train, with the metro, with all these mobility possibilities, in fact we are, in comparison to other university, very low percentage of emission in carbon. And we have also some energy consumption, and you can see that we have, as you probably, many questions about electricity, heating. It's also, of course, also very close and related to the building question. And in France, we know, as for a lot of country in the world, also the big problem with the energy consumption is in the last year, and so we are trying to work a lot in order to reduce our energy consumption. And so, of course, what can be the actions that we can develop following this carbon impact and carbon analysis? We are trying to rehabilitate all building, and we have a lot of building, of course. So we are trying to make on insulation, heating, electricity, network leaks, and so on. We are trying also for the new construction to introduce all the sustainable development standards that you can find for the new construction. We are also trying every time that we are making a new building to target the high environmental quality label. So it's a specific label that we have in France. And we are also working on the use of alternative energy, photovoltaic, but also wind energy, because we have many possibilities, and so we can try to develop this for different buildings in our university. About the layout of our campus and workplace, different action. We are working on biodiversity, vegetation of the space. So here you can see an example of vegetation on the floor, on the top of a building. We are working also on furniture for students. We are trying to offer to the student different furniture in order to allow them to be well installed, to well work in our campus. But we are also working a lot with the Fab Lab. So probably you know this concept. It's offer finally a possibility on our campus to the people, students, but also all the people in our laboratory and service. They can make, they can construct by themselves different things. They can reuse different material and go to see the Fab Lab in order to have an help and to have an access also to material, to skills, allowing this kind of activities. And here I can show you the last challenge of the Fab Lab. They try to stimulate the idea to have a brainstorming about the vegetation inside. And so here it's a big challenge in the university, and all the people in the university can, of course, try to work on this subject. About the lifestyle and the good practice in the workplace, we are working on many subjects, waste management, of course, the responsible purchasing, so it's a big part, because as you have seen, we have also different question, a strong impact of our purchase. Plastic in everyday, but also plastic in research. It's not only a question of bottle, but it's also a question of some specific consumables that we can find in our laboratory. The eco-gesture, the mobility. And so I can show you some example of action. For example, the bicycle plan that we develop in the next past years. We try to place many terminals inside, but also outside of our campus in order to, of course, attach and secure bicycles. We develop new contract to offer to also possibility to install electric containers, because now it's also new on the market, the development of the electric bicycle. We also install, and you can see on the photo here, some specific repair terminals. So just near the secure terminals, you can find this type of materials, and you can repair on the place your bicycle. And we also stimulate the use of bicycles by giving a bonus of 2,000 euros to all members of the university taking the bicycle one day or all the week. And it looks to very big stimulating things, because we can see that there is an increase of the number of bicycle of the staff in the university. Another example is, of course, the rules that you can establish for the travels and the use of planes, of train. And we establish a general rule for all the university with the number 5. It's a very key number, 5 hours. The rule is clear. If you are to travel below 5 hours, train must be taken. If it's upper, you can take the plane, but with the strong recommendation to use the train. The only one exception is when your destination is not served by a train. And the rule is very strict, because there is a checking of your destination by the member of the administration. And they can cancel your travel if it's not respecting the rules of the university. Another action, it's an eco-gesture. In this case, in fact, we made 2 types of action. Of course, the creation of a poster to display everywhere. So here you can see some graphic representation of different situations, the consumption of electricity, the use of the refrigerator, the use of email, and so on. So we are trying to have a nice and funny presentation of the things in order to also to convince the people to use this type of poster and to use to realize the action. But we are also making a guide in order to explain the different level of action. And so, for example, for the electricity, we explain what can be the action for individuals on electricity, but we are also trying to explain, so it's a pedagogic work, what are the action of the university on electricity, because we are believing that it's very important to ask to the people to participate to the global efforts, but it's also very important to explain to the people what are making the university on the same subject project. Of course, it's not the same level of action, but it's very interesting to explain the compatibility of the action. And about the social policy and territorial strategy, we extend finally the social policy also to the health and the culture. Our position in university is very clear. The social and cultural dimensions are the pillar of the sustainable development and place people at the heart of the exchange and the issue. Be part of the sustainability of practice and action in favor of the quality of life at work and the collective. So we realize for that different action. We have action on parity in the recruitment and the promotion of personnel, but also equal opportunity for students in different situations. We promote the strive training on quality of life at work, psychosocial risk management. We also promote action for health and well-being. For example, for students, it's a very good example. There is a free possibility for students to see a doctor or psychologist. It's included, in fact, in the life of the student. They have an access to health system internal to the university. And one example of association of circular economy with a social impact, it's a last initiative that we display in the university. It's a BBOB project. The BBOB project is a very interesting initiative with the fact that in our libraries, you can now borrow everyday objects, as for example, ski, tent, tennis racket, stove, many objects, because we realize that our students are living on the campus. Some are coming from other country, other town, and of course, they want to live, and so sometimes they want to buy some specific tools, some specific object, and so to reduce and to have finally a circular economy strategy, we realize that with this possibility of library offer. Finally, the students are very interesting, and they don't want to buy the object. They just come to borrow, and it's very, very interesting and very. It's a success finally because it's now open since the beginning of the year, and we are buying now new object because there is no enough object for our students. I have finished. Perhaps I'm a little bit. No, I'm in time. Thank you for your attention, and of course, it will be a pleasure if there is any question.
Thank you very much, David. It was very comprehensive and interesting. I would be interested, which is also in line with one of the Slido questions. What was the driving force for starting? When you were starting talking about the sustainability agenda and SDGs, what was the driving force behind, and what were the key challenges, if you can recall or if you know the history?
The driving force is clearly the presidency of our university. So it's a political action, clearly, and also some individuals' motivation. In fact, we saw in the last past year many questions, many people very interesting by this question, but also with anxiety, and the students also are very important in all that, because we can see that finally there is a difference between the generation, and a lot of students take a lot in consideration all these questions about climatic change and sustainable development. And so it's why now in our university there is a strong political position of our presidents, but also of finally all the politic of the university, because yes, there is an anxiety and a need to change.
And the second part of the question was related to key challenges.
There is many key challenges. in fact, in France, as you have seen in my presentation, the fact that we have a specific label, a national label, it's very nice in order to define the key challenges. And to the action, finally, it's very clear for all people because you have external reference. You are not creating your own reference, and so the key action currently it's to communicate a lot, to explain a lot about the different action, and finally, after you have to find the different funding in order to develop the different action, and communication, funding. So it's key steps in our system. It allows the development of our activities, our action, and the colleague and the student, since there is this national reference, has a clear understanding of all this action and are very happy about this action.
Hello, I want to thank for a very interesting presentation. And I have one question. I think that you thought that you've got 3 faculties and each of them got some kind of team or something like this. So I would like to know how many people in total are actively working in the field of sustainable development in your university, like the main important people. I think that you also included students. It's going to be maybe hundreds, but what are the solvent of it?
It's a very good question. First, before to give a number, I have to, of course, to be honest, that since there is 3 faculties, but also 3 different type of interest for the sustainable development, involvement is different from one faculty to another. Of course, for example, in medicine, they are interested, but less than in science, because there is a lot of climatologists, people working on biodiversity and so on. Globally, about the number of people, I can say that every day in the university, in my team, there is around 20% working intensively on the question. And in the faculty, there is, yes, an active group of 20-30% per faculty. So it's finally the people that you can find in our general assembly, and after you have different level of involvement in the faculty. Currently, through the survey, because we are developing, of course, many surveys in order to identify and to calculate what are the percentage of involvement, I can say that we have between 20 and 30% of people involved or interested by the question. So it's quite good, quite good.
Yeah, it's very good, I think. I hope that one day we also will be able to talk about this higher person. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So thank you very much. For me, it was very, very interesting, and I believe also very useful, at least for me and my colleagues. And it would be great to continue this kind of sharing and discussion on the topic of SDGs and impact and so on. So thanks a lot on my side, and I'll leave this few last minutes to any of you if you want to tell us something. Otherwise, have a great day and goodbye.
Well, if I may, Hubert, thank you very much for bringing us all together and for allowing us to get an overview about some, I would say, European approaches how to tackle impact and sustainable development goals. For me, it was quite interesting to see the certain approaches coming from France and from the UK and Poland, how universities think about and work with sustainable development goals. I really like what Julian has been saying, specifically because I was quoting the the impact report of Manchester University. I'm convinced that we will work on this topic in the future, and there is a lot of potential to grow the triangle consisting of knowledge transfer, impact, and sustainable development in the future. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you in order to figure out what we may talk about in 1 or 2 years' time. Thank you so much, Hubert, and your team for bringing us together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there are no more comments, I will finish our discussion. And again, thanks to all who presented here, who were watching. Thanks a lot, and have a great day, everyone.